This podcast is brought to you by Ignition from Inductive Automation. What is the Internet of Things, really? First off, the Internet of Things really isn't a thing. I've been saying that for some time. The Internet of Things often refers to connected devices, typically connected by the Internet Protocol, IP. So it's IP over, usually Ethernet, Wi-Fi, those sorts of technologies that connect a whole lot of devices, which can be sensors or actuators or bigger devices that incorporate all those things, like your iPhone or Android that's got tons of sensors in them, and they're all connected and they talk to each other, and we call that the Internet of Things. So is that really worthwhile? So why is it making all the hoopla and all the hype and everybody's talking about it, and analysts are starting practices and consultants have practices on Internet of Things, and companies, I've even run into a few companies who are starting teams to do something with Internet of Things. I've consulted with some companies who are saying we want to get in the Internet of Things, maybe we make an acquisition, maybe we do this or that or whatever, and I think they are missing pretty much the point. And the reason I say all that is because they're starting with the solution. I've talked to a number of companies and they've actually started something. Maybe they've put together some of their current products and they put them into a thing where they can call it an Internet of Things product line or solution package or something. And the problem is that it's a solution without a problem. So I've talked to a few companies where they had the solution and they went looking for problems. Well, what problem can we solve with this particular solution that we have that's, stuff that we already build or whatever we can put together in this way, and we can have a solution. So what problems can we solve, rather than starting the other way around and saying what problems are there out there and what can we put together to solve that problem. I've run into a few companies I've talked to, kind of the same thing. The CEO says, I hear about this Internet of Things, why don't we do something? And let's form a team and let's go look at Internet of Things. Once again, what is the problem you are trying to solve? So we can go from there. Now the next step is with the Internet of Things and as a solution, we have to look at another step. Just connecting all those things really doesn't do much. Now, there are cases like maybe in control where a sensor could talk directly to a motor starter, and so when this photo switch goes high, the motor starter clicks on and the motor starts, and we have an instant feedback loop right there. And so we have some connected devices, and I saw a control scheme 20 years ago at least, doing something similar to that, where we just go click, 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 and the PLC just sits above in a supervisory role and maybe says, whoa, everybody stop, it's break time, or something's down or whatever. That's a use case maybe, and that might work. But typically, what we're always talking about is data. So all these devices, no matter what they are, have some kind of data. So now we have data, we need a database. We need a place to go put all that data over this network, and hopefully it's not so much data that it swamps the network. There are Gartner reports and other reports about how many devices there are and how they all connect and how much data there is, and we probably don't have enough storage capacity in the world to store all the potential data we could be getting from the Internet of Things. But one thing is for sure, we need good, modern, powerful databases that we can access in different ways to store this data. So, and those are around. I just got off a phone call with a CEO of a company, and they partner with OSIsoft. Most of you all know OSIsoft, and they've had a database, a historian, originally for many, many years, and they're kind of the industry gold standard in our part of the world. So anyway, we have that, but we've got all that data. Does it just become ancient history that we mine and we can do some trend analysis and some of that kind of stuff? And big deal. Maybe we can even mine it and put it into a model, and we can model something, but once again, it's ancient history, as in a day ago or a month ago or whatever. And what good does that do us when we're operating a plant? It does us not a whole lot of good. So on top of all this, we need some really good fast analytics. We need analytic engines that can model things and run all this data into the models and various things and come out with something that makes sense for a problem. Like, for example, maybe predictive maintenance, and maybe not predictive maintenance of an individual motor, but maybe predictive maintenance of a unit, or something like that, something a little bit bigger, that a plant manager would be interested in controlling, and getting his maintenance manager and his operations manager and his engineering manager together in their team, and managing a plant, more of a plant-wide thing. And that's kind of what I visualize and I see coming. But we need that analytics. The analytics is going to be important. There's a new thing. Everybody, all God's children, got to have a platform. So the new thing now over the last year, especially the last 6 months, I've been talking to a lot of companies that have platforms. So I have built a platform, and the platform typically is an open connector to everybody's devices and the data coming in. And then it's usually somewhat closed, if not totally closed, as far as the database. Now, maybe they use something more standard like OSI Pi, where lots of people have built connectors to it. Or maybe it's their own proprietary database, into their own proprietary analytics, into their own proprietary software system, be it ERP or MES or whatever it might be, or whatever they might call it. And so there's that way to go. An interesting concept by the Linux Foundation, and Dell Technologies has been pushing this a lot, is an open source project to do an open source platform, but it's still a platform, and we're trying to figure out what these platforms really do. They bring data in, they connect to maybe security engines, database engines, analytics engines, visualizations, and so on, and they all kind of tie together, and the platform is like the key core component of everything that goes together. Problem is, how are these platforms going to work? There have been several LinkedIn conversations, and I'll cite a couple of people. You might look up Rick Bulata, who was involved in inventing actually Lighthammer, that was bought by SAP, and then ThingWorx, that was acquired by PTC recently. And he's been doing connectivity stuff for lots of years, and he's an entrepreneur and an investor. And he's been critical of a number of things he sees going on. Mike Brooks, who's another serial entrepreneur and investor, has been pitching in. And then I add my 2 cents too, of course, because that's me. But kind of looking at these platforms and wondering what's really working. One of the first ones that was really promoted in TV ads and everything is Predix by GE. Recently there's been some news that's been coming out that maybe, well, with the CEO transition from Jeff Immelt, and things are coming out that maybe Predix isn't quite as good as what the advertising would have implied. And those of us in software are not shocked, because software is very difficult, as in very difficult. And coming up with a platform that ties lots of stuff together is a difficult proposition. So one of the interesting things to look for in this whole Internet of Things is interesting analytics engines, better visualization, and maybe something closer akin to real time, where operations and maintenance can use this information more rapidly to do asset management on a more timely manner. I just talked to Humaira Malik, who is founder and CEO of a company called Canvas with 2 S's, and just got off the phone. So this is really interesting stuff. She's talking about a new company with some new models, and it's more akin to real-time analytics. She didn't say it that way. I am saying it that way. But they partnered with OSI Pi or the OSI Soft and their databases, and they can chunk data through their engines using machine learning and artificial intelligence to match up with models, and then have the models continually learn so that information can get to the plant in a much more timely manner. And I can visualize taking this another step, and I think we're on the way to something that's really powerful for our plant management teams to come together and actually use Internet of Things for plant management. And I think that's kind of where we're going with it. It's going to take a long time. It's really difficult stuff. It's like you just don't sit down and write a few lines of code and bingo, there it is. But I'm thinking let's keep a look for new analytics engines, take a look at Canvas, take a look at maybe any other new ones that are coming along. We're going to watch platforms and see what happens and see if anybody can make a stable platform that ties things together, or maybe they're just another way to tie things together that we don't need to be so complex. And maybe we don't need it all to be in one company's own, no matter how open they try to make it, within one company's own ecosystem and more of an open ecosystem, maybe like the Linux Foundation one that's called EdgeX Foundry, or maybe a concept that leverages some ISA 95 stuff in an organization I'm affiliated with called Mimosa, MIMOSA.org, mimosa.org. And there's a platform that they've developed, but it's not a rigid platform. It's more of a system of systems based on standards. And it's, like I say, it's described in ISA 95, which gives it some standards basis. Some use cases have been developed and some preliminary pilots have been done using it. Looks interesting, maybe not so complex as other things. That's an area to look and evaluate if you're a user and looking where you want to go. And on the other hand, take a look at what's the problem I want to solve. It's a predictive maintenance, but maybe more than predictive maintenance. Maybe not predictive maintenance of a motor, but maybe a unit or some other set of assets, or maybe a whole asset, that sort of thing. Let's look at the problem first and then see which of all these technologies we have that we can bring together and bring a solution to bear. So a few thoughts on the Internet of Things. I didn't really describe what it is really. I think what it is really is just the start of something good. So this podcast is brought to you by Ignition from Inductive Automation. Inductive Automation's user conference is next week. I will be there. If you're going to be in Folsom, California, stop by and say hi or drag me out of a meeting or whatever. That would be great. So until then, this is Gary Minchell, the Manufacturing Connection, talking Internet of Things. Have a good one.